Okay. Other questions for the respondent? All right, Mr. Clara, you have 5 minutes to close.
So based on what I just heard, I'm asking the committee then to compel the city to give us the remaining documents that's part of our original request. And I think the question is, like this thing about, let's look at the police reports. That she said that the transportation guy, because I can only hear what transportation is saying through her because they won't meet with us, that they looked at the police reports that we have. That doesn't make any sense because the police reports that we have are from 2018. We were only looking at the police reports for the first 2-3 months of this year. So he could have been looking at 2018 police reports to make a determination back in 2015 that they're going to do a road diet in 2016. And the question is, number one, like now they're saying, oh, we do have addresses. We were told they didn't have. So we don't even care about those anymore. We want the information relevant to number one on the list, which says all data and information used by the Transportation Division to conclude that reducing the lanes on 900 west of the Poplar Grove area would result in a 19 to 29% reduction in crashes. And when you ask, do you have all the information, or she would have said, yeah, we do, then what we learned here is that Traffic Division went online, read a federal report, and decided we're going to go do a road diet on 900 West, which would make a lot of sense. And they didn't put any thought into it other than reading something online, and that's why we're having all the problems that we're having. So at least if that were the case. She's saying that their information is still out there that we don't have, and the only thing we did receive is traffic counts, 2 pages of that, which wouldn't have cost $100 to produce. In GRAMA, it says that the public's right to access of information concerning the conduct of the people's business and to promote the public's right of easy and reasonable access to public records, which we're not seeing. And then finally, in GRAMA, it says that a public agency is not required to fulfill a request. It says, in response to request, a government entity is not required to fill a person's request if the record requested is accessible in identical physical form and content in a public publication or product produced by the government entity receiving the request. And then it says the government entity specifies where the record can be found in the public publication of the product. Then we shouldn't be charged a GRAMA fee for the fact that they decided to put it on the webpage. That's not what GRAMA says. It says that if you're going to produce it in another format, then point us to it, which they did. But it sounds like she's saying they charged us for that. And I don't think that that's appropriate. That we should be charged for the work that they did to produce. And at this point, we're saying we shouldn't be charged for anything, and they should be compelled to produce the remaining documents that we're looking for.
Can I ask a question? Are you going to ask one?
I was.
Okay, can I ask it after you then?
Sure. So I think we're getting a good picture of where you think the delta or the gap is, right? And it's related to number one. I think you answered the question earlier that indicated you don't know what might be responsive because you haven't had any communication with transportation. And I've heard the respondent, and she'll have a chance to answer this in her response, but I heard the respondent say that there may be records still available that are responsive to the request, but to me they didn't sound like they were responsive to number one. And so could you give me any idea of what you think ought to be available?
Thank you. That's a very good question. And again, because we're asking for stuff we haven't seen, and it goes back to just the feasibility aspect. That when you look in the road diet informational guide, it has a chapter in there, and it calls them practitioners, and it says that if you're a practitioner or a transportation person, it kind of goes through here, and it says you got to look at traffic counts, you have to look at the crash data, and like I read, it says not all roads are good candidates for a road diet. So if you're going to consider one, you got to look at this criteria, and that's all we're asking for is just say, okay, well, just tell us because we know it's not working. But beyond that, that's all we know, and then we can fit pieces together. So it's kind of like we're back engineering, if you will, to try to understand how this government entity is functioning, and saying, you gotta tell us in what, we heard a little bit, you know, and we're recording it, we'll go process it and say, what the explanation you gave sounds really feasible to me, that that's the end of it, that, you know, that's the extent of it, but we want to be sure.
So you would like to either see documentation that gives evidence of the considerations of the analysis, and or you would like to be told that there is no such record.
Right.
Right. Did you still have a question?
Yes, so are you representing yourself or the Poplar Grove Neighborhood Alliance today?
The Poplar Grove Neighborhood Alliance. I'm a community organizer for that group.
And is that group a 501c3? Or is
We're
it?
just, I think this week we are. I mean, they just turned in
You are
paperwork to do.
organizing?
Yes. Like they just registered with the state, and I think they might be, I don't know where they're at.
Thank you. Dennis?
I have a question.
Oh, sorry.
It's just to clarify, so are you asking for police reports from 2015?
No.
You're not asking for that, you're not asking for accident reports?
No, because we already know that there was 0 to 1 accidents a month here in one area, so we don't, you know, we don't need to know that.
You don't need that level of detail?
No, not at all.
All right.
All right. Again, I hear the commissioner's frustration and that he disagrees with the Transportation Division's determination to implement this road diet. But what we're here to discuss today is whether or not it was unreasonable for the city to deny the fee waiver request. And what I'm hearing from the petitioner is that he wants documents that would indicate that the division looked at all the criteria in the federal highway studies before it made its decision to implement the road diet. That's a different request. That's an entirely different GRAMA request, which he is welcome to submit to the city, and we will respond to that according to our procedures. What he asked for was copies of data and information used by the division to conclude that the lane reductions would result in the 19 to 29% reduction in crash rates. Those documents have been produced to him at no charge. So either does it feel as moot because they've been produced. The only document that hasn't been produced is the list of addresses, which the city would be willing to produce if the commissioner is still interested in that. And the other thing was potential police reports. And what I'm hearing is those records are not being sought. So either the city has already provided the records free of charge, and so does it feel as moot, or our initial request was reasonable because we thought we had provided the bulk of the police records that were responsive, and we made a reasonable estimate applying our policy that is adopted from the state, applying the statutory criteria, and made a reasonable decision to deny the waiver. So I would ask that you dismiss the petitioner's appeal or in the alternative affirm the city's reasonable denial.
So, I'm sorry. Can I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
So I think it's really boiling down to whether or not the city has responded fully to item number 1. You're contending that you have because you provided data and information. And if analysis was requested, that wasn't part of this request.
Correct.
Thank you. Other questions for respondent? All right, we'll move into deliberation. Is there a motion or somebody who would like to start the discussion?
Sure, she has a question.
Well,
Yeah, well, I'd like to give other people.
well, you know, it's still unclear to me whether I can make a motion or not. And I'm not going to start now.
Well, I can.
But I do want to say something, and that is, I feel like the city ought to say, I think information would include analysis. Data would be what they provided. Information would also be what they provided, but I don't think that they have to say analysis in order to get the analysis. So if analysis existed, then I would order the city to produce that. Or to say it doesn't exist, right? So anyway, that's where I'm at right now.
And I would say the same thing, it's a fine line, because we get in this position where the governmental says, entity says they produced all the records. The petitioner says, well, there needs to be something else. That's really a hard decision, impossible to find out which is which unless there's some sort of evidence, which there usually isn't. But an analysis is also a fine line, because if a petitioner asks someone to prove a substantial claim, as he stated, or to make an analysis or support claims, those are kinds of things that may not actually exist in records. An analysis might, but when you're asking something that substantiates his claim, that's really something that a governmental entity does when they're looking at the records, and it may not exist outside of that. But I'm with you, and if you want, I can make that motion, is that if there, because if he made a request that was fairly comprehensive, I won't say it was too broad, but comprehensive in what he wanted about data and providing that, so that if there is, but it may not exist, but if there is an analysis that exists, that the governmental entity should provide that. It certainly would be a public record. I don't think that there's anything in that would be non-public. It would be public records, and that all records are public unless otherwise classified. And that they should provide it as part of the request, and saying that the petitioner has said that the other parts of the list of people he knows is moot. He's given that up as an interest, and so have that as part of the motion.
So I have just procedural questions. Well, the matter before us is a fee waiver. So is it appropriate
It is a fee waiver, but
for records that have already been produced?
no, no. The city has said two things. So they first said that everything has been provided. I don't know. And if there is something that hasn't been provided, then yes, there would be a fee to it.
And they've also said what they think might have not been provided as response to the request.
Right.
And it's not really responsive to number one.
Right. And so what we're saying is that those other parts, we don't know. Yeah, but the fee waiver, if we should need to discuss the fee waiver, and we should. You do that.
I'm not sure if it's one motion or two, but I get what he's asking.
Yeah.
Right?
But
They're in front of us for a fee waiver. That's why we're here, but we're veering off into are there more records?
But the city's making two arguments. Either the fee waiver is moot, or there's still records to be produced.
That's what I would argue. The fee waiver is moved, but there is a second motion.
well, the fee waiver would go to
the
the
first.
second. No, because he's been provided. If the city has provided all that information, they're receiving free of charge.
Right.
Is this additional one that he would request a fee waiver?
But would the fee waiver apply
To the second one.
The second,
Which-
additional records if they find.
Right, which generally I would think would be a second motion, because this is about whether the record exists, and then the other one is whether it should be provided free of charge. Free of charge, not so we need to discuss the benefits of that. And the fact is that we don't know if it exists or not. The only thing we have to rely on is that the ending statement of the governmental entity, which was that, well, if he wanted an analysis, he would have to make an additional GRAMA request, and the committee saying, no, that's part of the original request.
Yeah, that's my question. It's not really a question, but I think it's inclusive in what the petitioner requested, that information should have been provided. And I also agree that fee waiver is moot. I mean, it's clear that the 9 hours and $99 was related to something that's no longer issues.
And I would just say that, I think the city has clearly indicated in their response so far that there are no, I mean, they've said there's records that might be responsive to other parts of the request. But they have not said that they believe that there's records responsive, additional records responsive to number one. And that, what they do know is responsive to number one is in the public record, right? It's publicly available. So, anyway, I think I already said that, so probably.
But if it's publicly available, then you simply say it's publicly available.
But I didn't hear anything from the city suggesting that there was an analysis included. It was just data, right? Unless somebody else wants to make a motion, you can make it.
So I make that motion that if there is an analysis that does exist, that be provided to the petitioner as a public record.
And can we also say that, and if it doesn't exist, that they
Yeah, it
say
doesn't
so?
exist, I say that there's no such record.
Okay. Is there a need to cite statute?
Well, it's public record under, what we say is under 301. No, that's a fee waiver, it's a public record under 301. I can't remember, it's that all records are public except, unless otherwise.
Oh. That's kind of number one, right, section one?
It's 201, sorry.
201?
63G 2012. But this would be a public record, it's in the public. Action is public, so it would be public.
All right, the motion's been made by Tricia and seconded by Holly. I'm going to read back the motion.
So the motion is that if analysis does exist, that it be provided as a public record, and if it doesn't exist, that the respondent say so, and that it is considered a public record under 63G2 2012.
Now, this doesn't take into consideration whether or not the government will charge for this.
No, that's a separate
That's
motion.
different. So,
I mean, we need another motion on that, don't you agree?
yeah.
All right, any further discussion on the first motion? Call the question, all in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0, with Cindy not participating. I don't think that counts as an abstention, right?
No, she's not. Yeah.
All right.
Say that Cindy is recused.
Yes.
Refused.
Okay.